paradrama tales.
He said I threw him under the bus, but all I did was tell our friends the truth, that I wanted to save their seats, and he didn't. If being honest makes me disloyal, then maybe the real problem isn't what I said. It's what he expected me to cover for. It started with the tickets. He bought them, he sent the invites, he texted our friends, followed up, confirmed who was coming. And I thought, okay, that's sweet. He wants to make this a group thing, something fun. I was excited. I imagined us all sitting together laughing before the show started, sharing snacks, maybe grabbing dinner afterward. You know, the small joy of togetherness. But somewhere between I got us tickets and they're running a little late, something shifted. The moment I stood to start saving seats, he looked at me like I had committed a crime against social order. "Don't do that," he said. "It's rude to save that many seats," and I blinked. Not because I disagreed yet, but because I was surprised he even saw a problem. The venue was still half empty. Other people were saving seats. No one was getting turned away or forced to stand. So I said, "They're our guests. Don't you want them to sit with us?" He sighed, told me again not to micromanage an event he invited people to. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't about etiquette. This was about control. He planned the outing, so I was supposed to sit down and stay out of it. Let him host his way, even if that meant watching 6 of our closest friends trickle in and scatter across the venue, because we couldn't be bothered to hold a few spots. That's the part that got under my skin. The part where we invited people, but only one of us was allowed to decide what being a good host looked like. To him, being polite meant not inconveniencing strangers by saving seats. To me, it meant not letting our friends walk into a room full of people and feel like afterthoughts. 2 definitions, neither cruel, but only one was allowed to stand. And I wish I could say this was the first time something like this had happened, but it's not. There's a pattern, a quiet one. He invites, he controls. I comply, or I'm making things difficult. This time I chose not to fight. I sat down. I let it go. But when our friends arrived, confused, disappointed, and asked why we didn't save them seats, the truth came out. Not to hurt him, not to humiliate him, but because I was tired of cleaning up decisions I never agreed to make in the first place. I used to think saving seats was a practical thing, a way to honor the people you invited, a gesture that says, "We thought of you, we made space for you." But that night, apparently, it became something else entirely. When I stood up to place a few jackets and bags along the row, I wasn't thinking about manners or crowd flow, or whether it might look pushy. I was thinking about our friends, about how awkward it feels to walk into a venue and scan the crowd for a familiar face, only to realize you'll be sitting 5 rows away from the people who asked you to come. He, on the other hand, was thinking about appearances, about how it might look, how it might make him look. "It's rude," he said. "You can't save that many." But people were saving seats all around us, couples saving for late spouses, parents holding space for kids in line for snacks, rows with purses and sweaters marking territory, and no one seemed to mind. Still, he bristled. Like the idea of laying claim to 6 empty spots would ruin his reputation with the strangers sitting behind us. And I realized this wasn't about rules. This was about image. He didn't want to look pushy. He didn't want to be that guy with a bossy wife, waving her arms and guarding folding chairs. He didn't say it out loud, but I could see it in the way he shifted in his seat, the way he spoke through gritted teeth. "Just sit down." So I did. But I wasn't sitting down to be polite. I was sitting down to keep the peace, his version of it anyway. And when our friends walked in looking around unsure, I felt that sinking shame. Not because we looked rude, but because we looked like we didn't care enough to wait for them. And he kept his dignity sure. He kept his image intact. But we lost something else in the process, a small piece of trust, a layer of warmth, the sense that this was a group effort. He chose saving face. I would have chosen saving seats. And maybe that's what this whole thing comes down to. Which matters more to you, how you look to strangers, or how you show up for the people you call your friends? I kept thinking about it later that night, the way my body obeyed even when my heart didn't agree, the way I sat down when he told me to, even though everything in me whispered, "This isn't right." It wasn't about the seats anymore. Not really. It was about being told yet again that my version of kindness was too much, that my instinct to include, to prepare to make others feel welcome, was somehow inconvenient, embarrassing, that it needed to be managed. And what stung more than anything was how easily I overrode myself to keep the peace. Because this wasn't the first time I've done it. This wasn't the first time I've shrunk, a little softened my voice, or stepped aside because his comfort was prioritized over my perspective. I'm not saying he's a monster. He's not. He's funny, thoughtful in his own ways, and he's not cruel. But he likes things a certain way. He likes being seen a certain way. And when something threatens that, even something as small as saving a few seats, he reacts like it's personal. I used to chalk it up to pride, or social anxiety, or he just doesn't like a fuss. But the more I look at it, the more I realize it's not about the moment. It's about the dynamic. It's about how often he gets to veto something without discussion, how often I'm expected to adjust without pushback, how disagreement becomes drama and silence becomes the safest choice. I don't want a marriage where one of us always leads and the other quietly follows. I want something built on mutual respect, even when we see things differently. And in that moment, that small, seemingly insignificant moment, what I needed wasn't a row of chairs. It was a sign that my voice mattered even if it came with a different idea. But instead, I got a command. Sit down. And I did. But something in me stood up anyway, quietly, internally. And it's still standing. Because sometimes the biggest truths show up in the smallest places, like a row of empty seats. And the silence it took to leave them that way. It wasn't a trap. It wasn't a setup. They just asked, "Hey, why didn't you save us seats?" No bitterness in their voice, no accusation. Just that friendly confusion you get when something small throws off the rhythm of what should have been easy. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could have shrugged, said, "Oh, it was too hard," or "We didn't know when you'd arrive," or even the version my husband wanted. "We tried, but people filled in too fast." But I didn't say any of those things. I looked at them and said, "The truth, I wanted to save your seats." But he thought it would be rude, so we didn't. That was it. No drama, no sarcasm, no blame layered on top. Just a clean, clear sentence that put the facts where they belonged. And for the first time that night, I felt like I had honored myself by not shouldering the weight of a choice I didn't make. Of course, I saw his face tighten when I said it. Saw that flash of, "I can't believe you said that," behind his eyes. Later, he told me I threw him under the bus, said I made him look petty, said I should have had his back. But what he really meant was, "You made me accountable." And maybe that's what stung. Because I didn't throw him anywhere, I simply refused to lie for him. I refused to be the one who nods along quietly while our friends wonder why. It feels like they were invited but not fully welcomed, and I get it. No one likes being exposed. No one likes their decision held up in daylight. But here's the thing. If your choice only feels safe when it's hidden behind someone else's silence, then maybe it's not a choice you're proud of to begin with. So, no, I didn't cover for him, but I also didn't condemn him. I just answered a question with truth, and if that counts as betrayal in this relationship, then maybe we've been defining loyalty all wrong. Because being a team isn't about rewriting reality to protect someone's ego. It's about standing in the same truth, even when it's a little uncomfortable. He said I threw him under the bus, and he didn't say it lightly. He said it with that quiet, clipped tone, the one he saves for, when he's not just annoyed but embarrassed. But let's pause on that phrase for a second. Thrown under the bus. It's a powerful image, isn't it? One person shoving another into danger, betrayal, and motion. But that's not what happened. I didn't twist his words. I didn't mock him or expose him to strangers. All I did was decline to take credit for a decision I didn't make. And that's where this gets interesting. See, when someone says you threw them under the bus, what they often mean is, you didn't protect me from the consequences of my own choices. But accountability isn't cruelty. It's clarity. He made a call. He told me not to save the seats. Twice. He stood by it in the moment. But when that decision didn't land well, when our friends were visibly disappointed, he didn't want to be seen as the one responsible. And that's when he turned to me. Not to say I was wrong, but to say, "You should have shielded me." But I've learned something in this marriage. Shielding someone from the truth doesn't strengthen the bond. It just buries the tension under layers of performance. I wasn't unkind. I was honest. And more than that, I was tired. Tired of being expected to step in and smooth over every rough edge, every choice that might make him look anything less than polished. Let me say it plainly. If you feel thrown under the bus every time someone speaks the truth about your own actions, you're not being betrayed. You're just being seen. Fully. Directly. Without the buffer. And maybe that's what really unsettled him. Not that I spoke up, but that for once he had to stand next to a choice without me editing the moment to make it easier on his pride. Because I've done that before. Too many times. But now I'm starting to understand that There's a difference between being supportive and being a shield for someone who doesn't want to be accountable. And I didn't sign up to be a shield. He said we should be a united front, that we're supposed to be a team, that even if we disagree in private, we present solidarity in public. And you know what? In theory, I agree. Marriage should be a partnership. We shouldn't throw each other under the bus or contradict each other just to win social points. But here's where it gets tricky. Does being a united front mean we always have to agree or just pretend we do? Because what he really wanted wasn't unity, it was silence. He wanted me to absorb the awkwardness, to offer our friends a convenient fiction just so he wouldn't have to feel the sting of his own rigidity. That's not partnership, that's a performance. And I've played that role before, nodded politely, smiled through disagreement, swallowed the frustration, and served the story he needed. But over time, that starts to rot you from the inside. Because when solidarity means never being allowed to say, "That wasn't my choice," you stop being a partner and start becoming a silent accessory to someone else's comfort. And the irony is, he says he felt unsupported, felt exposed, but I felt invisible because being told to sit down literally and emotionally wasn't about unity. It was about control. And I've been thinking, maybe the real united front we should be building is one where both of us are allowed to tell the truth, where we can disagree and still respect each other, not just in whispers behind closed doors, but in the full light of day. Because partnership isn't about one voice speaking for two. It's about both voices being allowed in the room. And if the only way we stay unified is for me to stay quiet, nod along, and protect his image at my expense, then that's not a marriage. That's a one-man PR campaign. So, no, I'm not sorry I told the truth. Because real unity is built on honesty, not on silence that erodes your self-respect inch by inch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm out. I didn't throw anything or make a scene. All I said was, no, no. I won't take the fall for a choice I disagreed with. No, I won't lie to save face his or mine. No, I won't be the kind of partner who smiles through quiet resentment just to keep everything looking fine. And I think that's what shook him the most. Not that I embarrassed him, but that I said no with clarity and without apology. Because here's the thing about saying no, it's not always loud. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it sounds like the softest sentence in the room. But it shifts everything. That no was a turning point for me. Because for years, I've said yes to the smallest of silences. Yes to letting him take the lead even when I had a different idea. Yes to smoothing the social wrinkles. Yes to absorbing the discomfort so he wouldn't have to. But this time, it just didn't sit right. I realized that when you say yes to everything, even things that contradict your values, your gut, your kindness, you eventually say no to yourself. You say no to your instincts. You say no to your standards. You say no to your own voice. And then one day, someone asks you a simple question, why didn't you save us seats? And you either lie and twist yourself into a shape you don't recognize, or you choose truth. This time, I chose truth. And with it came that quiet little no to the performance, to the self-editing, to the need to protect someone else's ego more than my own integrity. Saying no isn't rejection. It's recognition. It's saying I see myself now. I respect her. And I won't keep pushing her down to make someone else comfortable. And maybe that's the real problem, not the row of seats, not the text message tension, but the fact that I didn't sit down, not really, not where it counts. Because the moment I said no, I stood up for something much bigger than seating arrangements. I stood up for myself. He kept saying I embarrassed him, that by telling our friends the truth, I made him look bad. But let's be honest, the embarrassment didn't begin with my words. It began the moment he made a decision he wasn't willing to stand behind. I didn't humiliate him. I just didn't protect him from the natural outcome of his own choice. Because the truth is our friends were already confused, already disappointed, already side-eyeing the two empty seats between us, wondering why a group outing suddenly felt like a set of disconnected plus ones. I saw it in the way they lingered in the aisle, in the half-hearted, "It's okay, we'll just sit here," that didn't sound okay at all, in the polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. That wasn't my doing. That was the result of a moment, a small stubborn refusal to flex, to accommodate, to consider. And maybe that's the part he didn't want to face. That for all his concern about being rude to strangers, he ended up being thoughtless to the very people he invited. And when the discomfort surfaced when someone finally asked the question out loud, he needed it to land on someone else. Anyone else. Because if I had said, oh, we tried to save them, but it got filled up, or we weren't sure where you'd want to sit, then maybe he could have kept that version of himself, the considerate one, the easygoing one, intact. But I didn't say those things. And so, for once, the picture wasn't edited, the mirror wasn't tilted, the story wasn't softened to protect his pride, and that's what embarrassed him. Not the facts, but the exposure. But here's what I've learned. Embarrassment isn't something we create for others. It's something they already feel and project. It's born from the gap between who they think they are and how their actions actually land. So, no, I didn't humiliate my husband. I didn't turn on him. I didn't roll my eyes or throw blame like confetti. I just stepped aside and let the truth be seen. And if he didn't like the way it looked maybe next time, he'll choose differently. Because silence doesn't erase poor decisions. It just delays the moment they catch up. And that night, they finally did. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to make a statement. I just wanted to show up for our friends and for myself in a way that felt honest. But somehow, that small decision became a spotlight, and the moment I stepped out of the shadow, he was used to me standing in. He called it betrayal. And that's when I understood something I'd been circling for a while. In our relationship, my silence wasn't neutral. It was expected. Expected to keep things smooth, to keep his image clean, to absorb the friction so he could keep playing the part of the gracious host, even if it meant our guests were left out and I was left small. But here's the truth. Love that asks for silence when you have something real to say isn't partnership, it's PR. And I'm not his press secretary, I'm his wife, his equal. And if we're really a team, then I need to be able to speak not just in the privacy of our kitchen, but in the moments that matter. So, no, I didn't throw him under the bus. I stepped out from under it. And I let the truth walk beside me, not behind me. Because relationships that only survive when one person is quiet aren't strong, they're just quiet. So, to anyone listening who's ever been called disloyal for being honest, to anyone who's been told that loving someone means covering for them, even when you disagree, let me say this clearly. You don't owe anyone your silence, especially not when what's at stake is your self-respect. If you've ever said no softly and still got blamed loudly, you're not alone. Share this video with someone who's been holding their tongue for too long. And hit subscribe if you believe truth and partnership can exist in the same sentence, because around here, we don't trade honesty for harmony. Not anymore.